and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 407, and today's date is July 4th, 2014, and the title of this episode is U.S. Planning Operation to Airstrike Iraq and Syria to Take Out Assad. And before I get started, I just want to wish those people who are celebrating July 4th, Independence Day, happy July 4th. Yes, again, here we are fighting for our freedoms once again, just like our founding fathers. And for those people who have donated to the X22 site, thank you very much. I really do appreciate it. Let's get into what is going on here. Now, we can see the United States government and the central bankers, they are building up the connection between the terrorist group and Assad. We see now that Assad has been allegedly purchasing oil from the terrorist group. We can see that Assad has been working with the terrorist group, and this is all being done and using it to build this connection. We also see the Syrian Electronic Army now attacking different websites. Now they're trying to bring all of this together and trying to create this narrative that they are one and the same, and all of it is being done from Syria because it is the launching pad for terrorism, and they've been telling us this for a very, very long time, and they want us to make this connection. And each time there is more and more stories that are coming out where they're trying to make this connection, because eventually what's going to happen is the president, the United States government, they will say we need to go in and take care of these terrorists because they are the ones who did this to the United States. And when I say they did this to the United States, I'm talking about the false flag event. I'm talking about them doing something here in the United States to enable the United States government to go in and attack Assad. This is what they've been building up for. They have been trying to get into Syria for over 3 years now. They've used paid mercenaries. Of course, in the beginning they said, no, we're not giving them weapons. These are just the Free Syrian Army. They're doing this on their own. And then we come to find out that they lied, of course, because they always do. And they've been funding them, training them. They have secret bases in Jordan. They use a lot of false flag type of events to try to get us into Syria, and they have all been failing. They had the Geneva II talks where they asked Assad to step down. That was the only thing on their agenda, and Assad said no way, and the Geneva II talks pretty much failed. They removed all the government officials throughout the United States and sent them back to Syria. Then they had the opposition, the paid mercenaries, come in and say, okay, you are the acting government at this point. They had this huge training mission in Jordan during the same time when Assad was having his elections. Assad won the elections, and all the military assets and the personnel are still there in Jordan. That hasn't moved. Now we see more ships coming off the coast of Iraq because of the situation in Iraq. And you have to remember, ISIL and ISIS, they've been trained inside of Jordan. They were going to be used to get into Syria and remove Assad. And of course, the United States government is saying, no, we're not funding them. We're funding the moderates. They're not part of the same thing. But really, it's all the same. They got caught supporting Al-Qaeda, and they had to separate them and say, no, Al-Qaeda is here, and we're funding the moderates. ISIL and ISIS, they're an offshoot of Al-Qaeda, so we don't know who they are. And you can see their whole story is starting to fall apart a little bit. So what they needed to do is they needed to figure out a way and how to get into Syria. So they created this whole situation in Iraq. And now what they're trying to do is pretty much link up the terrorist group into Assad's regime and make it seem like it's all one, and all of this is coming out of Syria. Now, of course, at the same time, what was happening, the Ba'ath Party, the Sunni people here in Iraq, decided this would be a great opportunity to have a revolution, a civil war. They decided to take up arms and go ahead and start fighting. Now, of course, the United States government, the central bankers, didn't expect this. They thought they just had the terrorist group inside Iraq and then they would be able to maintain control. And now they have two things going on at once. But they're continuing with their agenda. They're not going to stop. And we have the Russian President Putin backing Maliki right now, sending him airplanes to use and other military assets. And of course, the F-16 fighters that were supposed to be brought into Iraq have been delayed because they don't want the terrorism to stop right now. They don't want the Iraqi government really to do much at this point because they need to show and build the connection. And they've been doing this very slowly. They don't want to move too fast. They want to make sure that everyone gets it, that it's terrorism, that they're taking away our rights, that there's going to be attack, because they're building this up very, very slowly and carefully because they have a plan. And their plan is to pretty much cover up this whole economic collapse that's going to happen. They're going to do this, and they're going to show that this event here in the United States was created and caused by another group, or Assad, who was controlling or had connections with ISIL and ISIS. And they're going to use this event to show that they created this collapse that brought the economy to its knees, and we need to go into Syria. And they've been building this up. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what is going on and how they're going ahead and trying to do this. But let's get into the economic collapse news. We see the largest Austrian bank has crashed, revealing about 40% surge in bad debt provisions. Now, of course, the central bankers are out there, and they're out there saying that, all of this is because of speculation, that because of the new laws that were created caused this whole thing. And you can see right now they're trying to cover the whole thing up. And what's really happening is the banks around the world, most of them are insolvent today. Most of them have a lot of bad loans on them. We see in Italy, we see it in Spain, we see it here in the United States, but they're all continually being propped up, and they're trying to hold everything together. And every time something happens or fails, they always bring up the speculators. They always bring up it's somebody else's fault. Now, here in the United States, what we're seeing is that housing has been pumped up, and we see this little bump that I was talking about. They're going back to May, the May data right now. Of course, we're in July already, and they're talking about May, how the housing market is doing better. We're in a recovery. But since that May period, housing has been completely declining. And right now, Shepherdson and Patheon Macroeconomics, they wrote the housing finally falters. A breakdown showed that private residential construction was down 1.5% on the month. The details show new housing construction ex-home improvement fell 1.2%, the first outright decline since September of 2011. We also have continued weakness in mortgages, and we know this. Most of the Americans are completely tapped out. They just don't have the funds, and we're seeing a 66% drop in mortgages and refinancing at this time. We also realize the banks already knew the housing market was being propped up using Fed free money. They knew the whole scheme, and this is why they started back in August laying off thousands upon thousands of people in their mortgage departments, and they're continuing with the layoffs because they realized and they knew that no Americans are going to take out loans because they have been robbed of their wealth. They barely can make ends meet. They don't have the jobs. They're underemployed. And of course, they're coming out with this new number of unemployment, which is 6.1%. And everyone realizes now that this is completely phony, fake, and made up. And of course, we realize that they've changed the calculation, but they need to keep the illusion alive. And again, like I said before, the illusion that they've created is starting to separate from the reality of the economy. And we can see already major financial institutions that were calling for a 4% or a 3.5% GDP in the second quarter. They're all revising their numbers downward. Right now, JP Morgan was out there saying, okay, we're now seeing that the second quarter GDP is going to be about 1.4%. Now, they started at 2.8%. Others started higher than that, and they're continually lowering it as time goes on. Now, why are they doing this? It would be impossible. Now, of course, they can manipulate the numbers and just say, oh, yes, look, we had a 1% positive GDP. We sprang back, and who knows? They could do this. But what's going to happen over time is they're going to revise it, and it will come back down into the negative range. All of a sudden, they're blaming it on weather. It has nothing to do with weather. It's what's happening in the economy. And you have to remember the GDP numbers were recalculated, and they went back to 1929 and recalculated these numbers, and they included research and development into the calculation to keep us in the positive range, and this isn't even helping at this time. So they're going to have to manipulate it once more to bring us into a positive range. We might even see it go up like the 0.5% just so they can say that we're improving, but you know what's going to happen. They're going to revise again, and we'll be in the negative range. And they really have no explanation for this because they don't want to use the explanation that the economy is completely failing and it's imploding on itself. And this is why they are really pushing hard for wars in all different areas. In Ukraine, in the Middle East, they are pushing as hard as they possibly can. They're trying to provoke Russia. They're trying to provoke China. They're trying to provoke as many countries as they possibly can. Of course, those countries are the ones that are not part of the private Western Central Bank. And we also see that China has been making deals, and Russia has been making deals all throughout the world. Bilateral trade deals. I mean, we just saw the latest deal with the UK. We saw it with New Zealand, with Australia, with Kenya, and with Luxembourg, with France. I mean, it's going on, and they're making deals setting up the yuan and renminbi. And now China has agreed to do direct trade with South Korea. South Korea and China have agreed to create a market for direct trading of the yuan and the won, which will cut foreign exchange costs and boost bilateral investment. The Memorandum of Understanding between China's central bank and the Bank of Korea to create a yuan clearing system. The main idea of the agreement is to provide an agent through which financial instruments such as shares, bonds, and currencies will be traded. Clearing banks will be capable of making payments in the renminbi within South Korea, bypassing the dollar. So we can see right now that they are pushing this agenda forward, and the central bankers realize this. They realize they're trying as hard as they possibly can to keep the dollar propped up, and they see it falling, faltering all over the world. Other countries' central banks are losing faith in the dollar, and this is why they need this event and this war. They need to cover up what is coming. And again, when all these countries decide not to use the dollar to sell their natural resources, the rest of the world will not have to hold these dollars in reserves. If they do not have to hold these dollars in reserves, those dollars come back to the United States. They flood the United States, which increases the circulation of the currency. As there's more currency in the United States, it devalues the dollar, which means goods cost more, and this is where we see inflation then hyperinflation. And this is starting to ramp up now, and these are the problems that we are seeing. And they realize this, and of course, when the collapse comes, people are going to be shocked. They're going to be scared. They're not going to know what's going on, because you have to remember their story. When I say their story, it's central bankers, U.S. government, has been we are in a recovery. This is all they've been hearing. Stock market is high. Gold is staying level, so there's no problems. Unemployment coming down. Housing is in a recovery. When the system comes crashing down, even a little bit, they're not going to understand this. They're not going to understand what happened. When the layoffs start again, everyone's going to be scratching their head going, I just had a job. Now I don't. My bank account is frozen. What's going on here? Well, the central bankers, the U.S. government, they don't want to be blamed for it. So they're going to create the event to blame this on another group, and this will help bring us into war, which will cover up what is really going on. Now, we understand that the U.S. government and many governments are trying to take the rights away from the people. They don't want them to see certain things on the internet, and they don't want people to speak freely, and they're continually trying to do this. And we can see right now that the UK has set up internet filters. Of course, this is under the guise that they didn't want children to go to the porn sites, but I believe that's really the parents' responsibility, and you cannot start putting up filters to block everything. And what we're seeing right now is that almost 1 in 5 websites are blocked by the UK's internet service provider filters. Well, of course we saw this coming. Did you really think they were just setting it up for the porn sites? And of course a open rights group decided to create this app, and they tested about 100,000 sites, and 20% of them were blocked. And here are some of the sites that are blocked. The political sites are blocked. Feminist rights blogs are blocked. I mean, it's just strange of the sites that are blocked here. And we are seeing that this was done on purpose. They use the excuse that they're trying to protect the children, but really what's happening is they're putting the filters in place to block all the things they don't want the people to see. Believe me, here in the United States, they want the ability to block out all the alternative media. They would love to do that. And this is why they're trying to pass all these internet type of laws. They want to take control of the internet. You have to remember, they have control of the creation of money, they have control of the corporate media, and the internet with the alternative media. This is the Wild West. They have no control over it. It's very difficult for them to control. Yes, they have trolls to go on sites, but everyone now realizes what's going on, and they would rather just shut it down and them have control. Now, some of the ways they're trying to control it is they're trying to put biometrics where you have to put your finger on your laptop to gain access into the internet. They're trying it also with net neutrality, where they're giving the sites they want who have money to be seen, and all the other sites you might or might not be able to get to. So you can see they're trying all different types of methods to shut everyone out, so you only hear what they want to tell you. Now, on this 4th of July, we understand our founding fathers have fought for our rights, for the freedoms that we're supposed to have, and right now, of course, the police, the U.S. government, continually takes it away during this time. And this wasn't done as a coincidence. This was done on purpose. They wanted the rights being taken away on July 4th. And right now, the police are out there. They're setting up checkpoints for 4th of July to check for DUI. And again, this is unconstitutional, just to stop someone for absolutely no reason. And they're forcing people to take breathalyzer tests. And they're saying if you don't take the breathalyzer test, we will then draw blood from you. And Texas is doing this, Oregon is doing this, Tennessee is doing this, and they're performing these invasive procedures. And again, this is unconstitutional. You really can't be stopped if you haven't done anything wrong. And they are taking away everyone's rights slowly but surely. And another way they're taking away our rights is, of course, they announced a terror threat, where now you'll have to be searched further when you go to the airport, when you go to the sporting events, when you go to see fireworks. They want you to feel like you have no rights, where you don't have the right to go into these areas without being searched. And of course, now they're making the case where they need to search your laptop. They need to log on and look through it. They need to get into your phone, because of course the bombers now are hiding the bombs inside the cell phone, so they'd like to take a look inside your cell phones and take a look around to make sure. And they're doing this on purpose to keep the fear level up, to show you that, yes, these terrorists are coming to get you. And of course, we know all of this is being concocted by the government to get us into war. Now, out in Ukraine, we can see Poroshenko pretty much lied about everything that he promised during his election campaign. Not really a surprise. We knew he was full of it. He's part of the puppet regime. We knew his agenda is not peace. It is what the bankers want. The bankers want Ukraine. They want the Southeast sanctions. They want Crimea. They want it all. And right now, what we're seeing is the Southeast region have evidence that a lot of the bombs and shells that are used are originated from America. They're also saying that NATO is supplying the Ukraine forces with weapons. NATO's newest Eastern European members are handing over their Soviet arms stockpiles to the Ukrainian army. NATO is asking its newest members to get rid of operable Soviet military equipment and send it to Ukraine. And in turn, don't worry, the U.S. is ready to compensate for the losses of the newly co-opted NATO member states. Now, this is absolutely ridiculous. The U.S. is going to pay for these weapons. I mean, They're the ones who went in there with a coup d'etat to overthrow the government. They thought they were just going to take it over with ease, and now they have the people fighting back, and of course they call them terrorists. They are doing a ethnic cleansing of the country, and they are calling them terrorists, and they have an anti-terrorism force. And you can see the agenda here for the United States central bankers is completely different than in everywhere else. In Ukraine, the people who are fighting against the regime of the country are terrorists, and the government there is killing civilians. Now, in Syria, the reason why we were backing the paid mercenaries and still backing them is because Assad was killing his own civilians. This is the argument they used. And now the United States government central bankers are doing the same. So really, all of this is a bunch of BS. Whatever fits their agenda, this is what they use. Now, yesterday, or maybe it was 2 days ago, I reported how the United States government said that no, people are not leaving Ukraine because of what's happening there, because they're fearing for their lives. They're going to visit their relatives in Russia, their grannies, but they'll be back. And now what do we see today? We see Ukrainian snipers are shooting cars that are trying to leave Ukraine and go to Russia. And it's stopping them and making them turn around. So we can see right now they realize that the people are trying to escape because they are killing innocent civilians. They're firing upon hospitals, schools. They're putting down landmines and blowing up civilians. And now they're shooting at cars to keep them from going over the border. Now, it seems like they're really pushing their agenda in Lugansk. They've just shelled a power station. The power is off. The power is off in Slavyansk, and they're just shutting it all down, making it very hard for the people. They have not let up whatsoever. And of course, what do we have? Well, Poroshenko just announced that he appointed a new Ukraine's defense minister, Valery Helety, and his first promise is to get Crimea back. And he's saying that Ukraine will be victorious in this. New Ukrainian defense minister has promised that the army would retake Crimea, restoring the country's territorial integrity. Addressing parliament in Kiev, he said there will be a victory parade in Ukraine's Sevastopol. So you can see they are not letting up. There is no peace. You understand that Russia, Germany, France, Kiev, they're all talking about these peace agreements and things like that. I mean, we can cross our fingers. Hopefully there is peace, but I don't see the United States involved with this whatsoever. And we see the bankers have set what they want, and they said they want Ukraine, and this is what they're trying to do. So peace is going to be very, very difficult at this point. Now, we understand that Kuwait is going to sell their oil using Bitcoin. And what's very interesting is that all of a sudden we're seeing riots in the street against the government. It seems like this always goes hand in hand. Of course, they're using a different story of why this is happening. They're saying that a former opposition leader, al-Barak, exposed the corruption among the elites, and this is why the people are out in the streets, because the government said, okay, we're going to sue or imprison that man because of slander about the government. And right now we're seeing the people in the streets rioting, and there's tear gas, and they're using rubber bullets against these people. But it just seems strange how Kuwait just announced that they're going to be trading oil in Bitcoins, and all of a sudden we are seeing riots start happening in the streets at the same exact time. It almost reminds me of Ukraine, when Ukraine said, okay, we're going to go with Russia instead of the EU, and then right after we saw the riots and people were rising up saying that we want the EU system, we want the EU system. And it just seems like it's the same exact thing again. Because again, we have to remember, the central bankers need all natural resources sold using the U.S. dollar. Now, we see that Saudi Arabia has deployed 30,000 troops at the border after they're saying the Iraqi troops have withdrew from the border, and they have their troops ready to go just in case. And who knows why? The real reason is it hasn't really come out what they're actually trying to do, but I'm sure this has to do with what is going on inside of Iraq with the terrorist groups. Because you have to remember, Saudi Arabia, Israel, the United States are all part of. Now it looks like the moderate Syrian rebels, where the United States, Israel, and other Arab nations were paying for them to fight Assad, it looks like after months of fighting, the Syrian regime and jihadist insurgents are saying, you know what, I think we've had enough here, and they're threatening to quit at this time. Now, I'm wondering if the United States government central bankers have been hearing about them quitting or saying, you know what, this has been going on long enough, we're done here, and this is why they had to start with the terrorist group in Iraq, because they've been trying to get into Syria for such a long time. Assad has been winning the battles there, pushing the paid mercenaries out, and you know they're not just going to say, okay, let's forget it, let Assad have his country. You know they're not going to do this, and this is why all of this was ginned up at this point in time. Plus, we see that tribes inside each one of these countries are starting to rise up, and it's threatening the U.S. dollar in each one of these countries. Now, there are reports that there's terrorist or ISIL sleepers inside of Baghdad planning zero-hour attack in Baghdad. Now all this is set up, and they're probably going to end up doing this because they have to show the terrorist group is making moves all over the place. And you have to remember, it's just not the terrorist group that is in there. It is also the Ba'ath Party, the generals from Saddam Hussein, the Sunni people. The tribes have been joining in, and this story might be out there to say that the tribes are very close and Baghdad might fall to them. And this way, of course, the United States central bankers and other private Western central countries can say, okay, we need to go in there. But again, they did not attack the United States, so it's going to be very hard to make their case. But don't worry, General Dempsey is out there, and he refused yesterday to rule out that they would send in large numbers of American troops into Iraq. And the only way that we would send these troops in, if we get to the point, if our national interests drive us there. If it becomes such a threat to the homeland that the President of the United States, with our advice, decides that we have to take direct action. So basically, if somebody attacks the United States and is a direct threat to the homeland, and it came from this region, then we can go in there. Well, yes, that's true. If somebody does attack the United States, the President can use the War Powers Act and can declare war and send the troops in there. So what are they really trying to say? They're trying to say that we're going to have a false flag event here in the United States. And where is this going to originate from? You guessed it, Syria and Iraq, from the terrorist group. Now we understand that they're blaming Russia for this new malware, and it's threatening the power grid across the country. Of course, this is being used to demonize Russia. Really, what would be the motive of Russia to do this? They really wouldn't have a motive, because if they really wanted to crush America, they wouldn't have to knock out the power. All they would have to do is pretty much have China, Russia, and the other BRIC nations dump the treasury bonds. It would crash the entire system. That's all. Very simple. That's all they would have to do. So this whole thing about Russia knocking out our power grid seems a little far-fetched, but of course they're using it to demonize Russia, just like they demonize all those countries that are not private Western Central Bank backed. Now, right now, the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator, Inc. said it was notified on June 26th that a computer server tied to its independent monitor was breached. The grid serving California, Texas, New York, and New England use the same market monitors, and they're very nervous about this. Utilities have stepped up their information security efforts as new sources of power have made grids more vulnerable by adding potential entrances for hackers. President Barack Obama signed an executive order calling for work to assess which parts of the grid are most at risk. So we can see right now that they're very nervous about this because they're saying this malware has attacked some of the grids and they're interconnected in some way. And they're the ones in California, Texas, New York, and New England. Now, of course, we know why this is all happening at this point, and I've been saying this for quite a while. They will use the doomsday cyber attack, and this will bring down the power grids in certain areas. I do believe back in 2003, I was in Manhattan at that time, that they brought down the power grid as a test. Just like before the World Trade Center was brought down, they had a bomb test in the basement, in the garage, to test it out, to build the story. The same thing here in 2003. They blacked out the East Coast. They wanted to test the system to see if they're able to do it. What we're seeing right now is the buildup of knocking out the power grids. They had physical dry runs on some of the power grids. They had cyber attack dry runs on the power grid. They had drills that had to do with cyber attacks on the financial institutions and the power grid, and now we're seeing it build up right now. We also see the Syrian Electronic Army also using cyber attacks, and they're mocking the cybersecurity of the United States. Now, there is another warning out there from Algeria. Americans in Algeria warned of Independence Day attack. Here's another instance where the United States needs to get into Algeria, because who is there again? China. China is in Algeria. China and Algeria established recently what they call the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership. Of all the relationships China has built with Arab countries, the partnership is the first of its kind. Secondly, the latest economic data shows that France lost its position as Algeria's major supplier to China in 2013. Algeria, which already runs Africa's biggest defense budget, is looking to increase its military cooperation with China. And right now, the State Department has urged employees of the U.S. Embassy in Algeria to avoid American-owned or operated hotels over July 4th and 5th. The department said an unidentified insurgency group might be planning a major strike during American Independence Day on July 4th. So you can see right now they use this in every single place they want to bring in troops. They did it with Boko Haram in Nigeria, they did it in Kenya, they did it in Sudan, they did it in Mali, and now we're in Algeria. And you can see they're continually doing this and not letting up. Now, yesterday it looks like Israel was cyber attacked by the Syrian Electronic Army, and you know this was a complete false flag to make you think that Syria now is trying to attack Israel. And you have to remember, Israel does have an agreement with the United States that if they are attacked, the United States will come to their aid. And you can see this is building up all over the place. You can tell that Israel kind of made this up. The message was taken down very, very quickly, and they were saying, oh yes, it was the Syrian Electronic Army, just like the Syrian Electronic Army attacked here in the United States. What would be the motive of Syria to do this at this point? It makes no sense whatsoever. It only makes sense from the other side, where Israel, the Arab nations, the United States wants to get into Syria and remove Assad, because they've been trying to do this for such a long time. Now, there are more terrorist threats out there, and they're continuing with this. Now they're saying that experts believe that Al-Qaeda bomb maker could be working with ISIS. Now they're connecting the two because they need to connect Al-Qaeda with ISIS. So they're going to say, and we've said this before, that they're both one and the same. Of course, they've been calling them old Al-Qaeda and new Al-Qaeda, but here they're making the connections. Concern about the prowess of Al-Qaeda's bomb maker chief has his willingness to work with ISIS insurgents in Syria and Iraq. A Saudi chemist who became a bomb maker has for years been on high America's Most Wanted list because he is believed to be behind many of the attempts to bring down transatlantic flights. And of course, this is the whole scare where they're making this undetectable bomb. They're going to be flying it in on an airplane, and it's going to explode someplace here in the United States or in the UK or in Europe. And they're scaring every single person because they're trying to build this up for the event. Now, of course, why is all this happening? It's all happening because they need to get into Syria. They need to remove Assad. They need to capture the resources there. They need to prop up the U.S. dollar. And at the same time, they will be starting war. And Obama right now is considering airstrikes in Iraq and Syria to take out ISIS targets, including its leader, Baghdadi, and its weapon stores. They are making the connection between Syria. Baghdadi now is the new bin Laden, and we need to get into that country. Look what we did in Afghanistan. Oh, we know bin Laden's hiding in caves. We have these fantastic diagrams. They have refrigerators. They knew everything about the caves except where this man was, because it was all fake and it was all an illusion. They went into Afghanistan because China was there. They wanted the opium. They wanted the natural resources, and they wanted to have a strategic location for the United States. And this is why they needed to get in there. The same thing's happening once again, because again, we have to remember the Islamic State said, yes, Syria and Iraq now are one. I am the new Baghdadi, and I control this area. We will be attacking the United States, UK, Europe. We'll be taking over Italy. We'll be taking over the world. And they're trying to make this an international threat, a terrorist group that has so much power that we all need to be afraid, and they're going to create this false flag event to show why we need to move into Syria and pretty much break up the Middle East to make it easier for the central bankers. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared.